Well, welcome to Christian Answers. My name is Pastor Jeff Short, and today we're going to be doing another review of the TV series The Story of God with Morgan Freeman. Now, you may have remembered, if you were watching this channel, that I did a review on the Part 1 series in 2016. I did, I believe, a small review of the 2017 series. And now, 2019, he has a Part 3 of the Story of God with new episodes. And I'm going to just say a few words about this Part 3 of the Story of God. Now, Morgan Freeman has played God in a couple of movies. He's played God in a number of different motion pictures, and he, I guess, did a good enough job that people now see him as sort of a godly father figure of sorts, and so they have hired him to do episodes in documentaries on religion. Other than that, I don't think he has any more qualifications to speak on religion than anyone else. But around Hollywood and in pop culture, he has sort of been associated with God by virtue of the fact that he played the character of God or the voice of God in the remake of Oh God and other different types of videos and films. And so now he has been recruited to do a third part of the series, The Story of God. And I have to say it's about the same type of show as the first couple of episodes and years of The Story of God, way back in 2016. What the format is, he goes around, he globetrots around the world, visiting different people in different religions, and he tackles a question. And if it's, for example, if it's on the topic of evil, which he deals with in this third season of The Story of God, he will go around to different individuals in world religions, and he will attempt to explain what, for example, the Buddhists believe about evil, and then what the Hindus believe about evil, and then what the Muslims believe about evil, and then what the Christians believe about evil. And then he may interview an atheistic scientist and talk about what this scientist believes about evil. And so that's the typical format of this whole presentation. And as I said before, 3 or 4 years ago, that makes for a very boring television show. If all you're going to do is present the various different religious perspectives on, for example, evil, or, for example, God, or, for example, salvation, on and on and on, the different themes of religion. If you're going to simply go around the world and talk about what each and every religion, or the major religions, believe about God, that's going to be a very boring television program, because a lot of people already know a little bit about, say, what Muslims believe about God, or what Christians believe about God, or what Islam or Hindus believe about God, or Buddhists believe about God. So it's a matter of simply regurgitating what is already somewhat common knowledge. Yes, there are some interesting people that he encounters in these different religions, sort of characters that have personalities, and they're kind of interesting to listen to as they talk and describe. But as far as the actual content, it's a very boring and dull presentation, because there is no in-depth analysis of the question, which is correct? What is the correct view of God? Without that analysis, without that in-depth conversation, without questioning these individuals of different religions on the theology and how they actually get around understanding these problems that are presented. For example, in the Hindu presentation or the Buddhist presentation of evil, if you interview someone like he does, trying to explain that understanding of evil, and they say, well, evil and good are all the same, and it's just a matter of perspective, and there's good in every evil person, and there's evil in every good person, and so there's good and evil and good, and so it becomes basically the same depending on what perspective you come at any given situation, then that presents some problems. But he doesn't raise those problems. For example, the most glaring problem would be in the Eastern religions, who basically say that evil is all in the eyes of the beholder, good is all in the eyes of the beholder. From one perspective, a good person is an evil person. From another perspective, an evil person is a good person. It all depends. It's all relative. If you take that position like the Eastern religions do, then the obvious question is, well, how do you know whether you're fighting evil or whether you're fighting good? Or is there any such thing as fighting evil or fighting or promoting good? And it becomes this helpless morass of relativism. And you really can't say for sure whether you're on the side of good or on the side of evil in Eastern religions, because what you may be doing may be seen as evil to someone, and what you may be doing evil may be seen as good. So their philosophical problem is that it contradicts itself. There is no fixed absolute good. There's no fixed absolute evil. You can't make universal absolute judgments about morality then. You can't give someone the compliment of being a saint, or you can't call someone like a Hitler an evil person, because, again, that relativism would blend everything in together, and that's the problem in Eastern religions. Well, that is an interesting conversation. That's a helpful conversation. That goes below the surface. It goes in depth, but that's not the conversation you're going to get with Morgan Freeman. We don't get the idea that Morgan Freeman goes very deep in anything. I don't know his background. I don't know his education. I don't know how long or how deep he has gone into these ultimate questions of philosophy and religion. But from the presentation, it doesn't sound like he wants to go very deep. He wants to keep on the shallow, superficial surface and deal with basically the simple answers that these representatives of different religions give. And he wants to keep it simple for the audience. He wants to dumb down every profound question to basically a question of, what does Hinduism teach? What does Buddhism teach? What does Muslims teach? What does Christianity teach? What does atheism teach? What does agnosticism teach? It just is a basic summary statement of all of these ultimate questions and their solutions, and there's no real in-depth back and forth discussion about which answer is correct, because the assumption seems to be on the part of Morgan Freeman is that all religions are basically the same. Now, you'll get this in college courses, you will get this in the secular universities, you'll get this in secular governments, of course, because secular governments don't want to appear to favor any one religion or philosophy. They don't want to appear to be biased and favor, for example, Christianity in Europe. A lot of the nations in the traditionally European Western nations go out of their way. They bend over backwards to show everyone else that they're neutral, that they're not going to favor Christianity, even though Christianity basically and essentially built Western civilization as we know it. The European nations, for example, like France and Germany and Britain, they make it very clear that they are not wanting to favor any one religion, especially Christianity, historic Christianity. So they make a point of showing that, oh, well, we're not going to give the Christian answer. In fact, we'll be even anti-Christian to show you that we are not biased in favor of traditional Christianity. But what happens in the academic settings and the government structures of our world today, in the modern world, is that all religions are lumped together. Satanism, actually the evil and perverted beliefs of Satanism are put in the same category as the good, solid Christian theology. And so you have any new wacko cult is put on the same level as the long-established and credible Christian faith. And so everything is a mishmash. Everybody's religion is thrown into the stew pot. And that's what Morgan Freeman seems to want to communicate with this Story of God series. He wants to try to communicate to everyone that religion, they all have answers. They're all different, and yet from different perspectives, they all make sense. Well, even that isn't true. The Eastern religions, for example, don't even try to be consistent on certain aspects of their faith. In fact, in Zen Buddhism, paradox and contradiction are at the heart and center of what they teach. And that's perfectly acceptable to the Eastern mind. But we in the West, we've been raised in, for example, Aristotelian logic, and we respect the law of non-contradiction. And so when you have something that claims to be one thing, and you can't then take the contradiction of that and say that's also true, and in the same sense, in the same way. Now, you can have an apparent contradiction, which is something that isn't different, isn't the same in the same way, in the same sense. But if you have something that is the same thing in the same way, in the same sense, and then you teach the contradiction of that, that is an outright contradiction, and it's not something that people should believe. And as Christians, we accept that logic. The Jewish faith also accepts that logic. But in Eastern religions, Hinduism and Buddhism, like I said before, paradox and contradiction are embraced in many senses. So you have a problem right off the bat in even discussing topics when you're talking from a Western perspective or an Eastern religious perspective. So that is probably one of the reasons why Morgan Freeman doesn't get into any depth on discussing these topics. But he does raise these topics. Now that's the frustrating part. He's raising issues that have the potential of being very interesting and the discussion being very fruitful. And yet, he is not the one that is able to actually carry on an intelligent discussion, and he doesn't interview people who are able to carry on an intelligent discussion about these. And the second problem with the topics that he tackles is that the format of his documentary is such that they don't spend any time on any one topic in any one discussion with any one person. So you have a 2 or 3 minute clip of a person talking and giving their point of view. And then you may have 30 seconds or a minute of Morgan Freeman talking about that topic or asking a question. But that's about as far as it goes. There really isn't a good discussion that Morgan Freeman gets into with anyone. It's all superficiality, surface level topic. Again, he's probably playing to the widest audience. Now, the series is airing on National Geographic, so you would think, okay, this is a little bit, probably the viewers of National Geographic are a little bit more sophisticated than, say, ABC, CBS, and NBC viewers in general, because National Geographic tends to have more intellectual, more sophisticated topics. But he doesn't take advantage of the fact that the viewers are probably a little bit more curious and a little bit more interested in a more in-depth discussion, he treats it as if it's on, say, ABC, NBC, or CBS, and it's being viewed for the mass consumption of people who have a wide range of interest. He's going for the lowest common denominator kind of discussion. And so the result is very unsatisfying. It's just like, okay, you raise this really good question, but you don't get into a conversation with anyone on any intelligent level. It's all surface level. So the only thing good about this documentary is it raises questions, but it doesn't really get into any answers that have any depth to them. And so I mean, the problem of evil is raised. I think it was raised before in the earlier presentations, like in 2016, and then the Story of God Part 2, the next series of programs that came out a year or so later, and then now this one, the third segment of the Story of God, year 3. It's the problem of evil is being raised continually, but it's not really being talked about in any depth. And these are things, the problem with this approach to religion is that when you open up a topic, you almost have to limit the scope of the discussion to a very narrow and specific question, and then you have to give the people who have anything to say about this time to develop their argument for their perspective. So if you're talking to a Christian theologian, you have to give that person time to actually explain the Christian understanding of evil. And because if you don't, then you're going to be talking past each other. And what happens today in this series is that Morgan Freeman, like I said before, is basically saying, okay, what does Buddhism say? And then a spokesman presents a 30-second Buddhist answer to the problem of evil. And then what does Hinduism say? What does Islam say? What does Christianity say? What does Judaism say? So it's just like these little snippets, and it's like, okay, great, but which one is true? Which one is the way reality really is? And the simple answer that Morgan Freeman wants to give us all is basically, it's up to each individual. And what that communicates, though, when you don't give time for in-depth answers, when you don't give time for in-depth discussions, and when you don't present content except on the surface level, then that's the only solution you can give then to the questions. The only solution, and that's the one he gives, it's basically up to everyone to decide what they think or believe about each of these topics based on their own feelings, preferences, ideas, beliefs, and that is not the way to go about ascertaining the truth. If you want to get to the truth, you have to dig below the surface. You have to allow other ideas to challenge your own. You have to defend your own ideas, but then if the other ideas are overwhelming or overpowering, you have to be willing to yield to that other idea if it's stronger. And that is how the truth is arrived at. Like Socrates said, the unexamined life is not worth living. So I'm afraid that this series, The Story of God with Morgan Freeman, is more of the unexamined life. Now, to be honest, a lot of people don't ever think about any other beliefs other than their own. If you're a Christian, and that is mostly the audience that's going to be listening to this, I don't think most Christians know anything about Buddhism. They hardly know anything about Hinduism. Those are the most exotic and strange beliefs to their ears in the West. I think Islam is something that Christians have learned a little bit about simply because of the interaction between the West and Islam. Unfortunately, negative connotations, terrorism connotations. Islamic jihad and the radical Islamic militants. That has risen to the level of consciousness for a lot of Christians in the West. But I don't think they know very much about the Islamic religion. They don't know much about what Muhammad taught, what the Quran teaches, and so forth. And so this maybe gives them a little bit of insight as to what some of these other religions teach. But unfortunately, it doesn't get into the depth, or it doesn't go deep enough to even really make any kind of value judgment about the credibility of these claims. And so what you have is basically this fail-safe fallback position of, well, whatever you want to believe, believe. Now, when Morgan Freeman comes to that conclusion, and he almost does after every single topic, at the end of the episode, and I've watched already 3 of the episodes in year 3, at the end of every episode, the message from Morgan Freeman is basically decide for yourself, based on your own beliefs and preferences, what you believe. And that's as far as it goes. So, in other words, for him, it seems like when he sees some of these strange and exotic things that are not widely known in the West, he is amazed, and his interest is picked, and he's like, wow, this is cool. That makes a lot of sense. And it's like whatever just impression is given to him, that's what seems to fascinate him. And that's not the way you think through these profound thoughts. It's not the case where if something strikes you as, wow, that's so cool. For example, he was dealing with a Buddhist monk at a Buddhist monastery, and they were dealing with the topic of evil in one of the episodes. I think it was episode 2 of year 3. And there is this ritual in the Buddhist monastery where the evil spirits, and they do believe that there are evil spirits, the evil spirits are actually invited into the monastery to befriend the evil spirits with the hope that they would be converted to be good spirits. And that was an intriguing thought to Morgan Freeman, and he found that interesting. And at the end of the episode, he says, well, in contrast to Christianity, who believes that we should always cast out and cast away evil spirits, Buddhism invites the evil spirits with the hope of converting them to be good spirits. And I wanted to... and that intrigued Morgan Freeman. That made him feel good. And he liked that thought of not throwing outside or casting away or casting out evil spirits like Jesus did. Get thee behind me, Satan. But he liked the idea that you would convert the spirits to be good spirits, and then you would be friends with them. And he thought that was a much better idea than the Christian view, which is harsh in regard to evil spirits. And I thought to myself, this is about as naive a thinking as you can get. I thought to myself, sure, wouldn't it be nice if reality were such that you could take a demonic spirit, talk him into being good, give him gifts like these Buddhist monks were trying to do. I think they offered him beer and so forth. It's sort of like telling the demons to come in and have a party here at the monastery, and then they would be open to changing their ways. Wouldn't that be nice if you could do that? The reality is, and the truth is, you can't do that. Jesus didn't cast demons out because he didn't want to deal with them and talk with them and befriend them and ultimately convert them. He cast them out because you can't convert them. They are irredeemable. The evil spirits will not ever change their ways. They have made their choice along with the devil himself at some past far back point in time. The devil and his evil spirits decided to rebel against God. That's what the Bible teaches. And that there is never, ever one record of any demonic spirit ever converting back to a good angel. And there's no hope, therefore, in the scriptures that any demon spirits will ever be converted and befriended and change their ways. If that were the case, then Jesus would have taken a totally different approach in dealing with demons. The disciples that he taught would have taken a different approach in dealing with evil spirits. But no, they dealt with them strongly and powerfully in the name of Jesus, and they cast them out because there is no hope of changing them. And so it's futile to talk about befriending a demon. This is dangerous theology, in fact. In fact, it's the kind of theology that will ruin people's lives if they ever actually believe it. And to have someone like Morgan Freeman actually promoting it and saying that this is better than Christianity because it offers hope to all spirits, whether they're good or bad, that they can ultimately be saved. It's ludicrous, it's ridiculous, it's actually dangerous. And so the Christian message would be never, ever try to befriend an evil spirit. Never, ever think that you can, through persuasion or offering gifts or bribing them or whatever, befriending them, that you can turn them to good. The devil is irredeemable, and so are the demons. So there's no use to even try to do that. It's futile. It's a waste of time. So this is just one example of the kind of naivete that Morgan Freeman is promoting here. You don't try to get a feel-good theology and please everyone in the world and not try to step on anyone's toes. When you're going into the realm of religion and philosophy, you are going to step on people's toes because the truth cuts. And there are beliefs out there that need to be refuted because they are errors. And you don't try to blend everything together and have everyone live in harmony and happily ever after with their contradictory religious beliefs. Evil is real. It's not an illusion. Evil is real. It's not the same as good, and good is not the same as evil. There is a distinction. God is good. He is the ultimate standard of good. And we need to look to him, and he has his will, his good will. There is not this relativism, this situational ethics situation where in Hinduism all things are good and all things are bad. It just depends on your perspective. No, that's wrong. That's error. That's false. That's dangerous. And as Christians, we need to stand up and say, no, we do not treat all religions as correct. There is only one true faith. And we need to argue for that faith and not cave way to the relativism that we see in this program. Well, I hope that's helped you, and we'll see you back next week on another edition.